This episode of CU Live is brought to you with support from Stoff's Coffee Roasters. Since 1988, Stoff's has been offering specialty coffee hand-roasted right here in Central Ohio. Stoff's is also a proponent of meaningful community conversations, whether online or in person. Visit their website at stoffs.com for the latest information on their locations, or to order online and enjoy a cup of Stoff's while you watch this episode.
Hello and welcome to CU Live. I'm Susan Post, Associate Editor of Columbus Underground. Today I have with me Jung Kim, who is the Managing Director of Research and Business Intelligence at One Columbus. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Susan.
So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the future of the workplace, which I think is a really big topic that's on everyone's minds right now. Because we're almost at a year since the pandemic started, which is just kind of crazy. And most folks still aren't back to kind of that pre-pandemic work setting. So I think obviously one of the biggest questions is, do you think a significant number of companies will continue to allow their employees to work from home?
I think it depends on what time frame you're talking about. Obviously, currently and for the near term, that is the reality, allowing people to work from home. If we're thinking what the long-term state looks like, no one really knows.
Yeah.
I can speculate about that a bit, and we can discuss. But ultimately, I think it depends on the company standpoint of whether they're trying to cut costs. How much leverage do they have with their employees in terms of, keeping them, retaining them? Are they going to lose them to more flexible employers if they have a more strict policy about people coming into the office? So it really depends on a lot of factors.
And we'll talk about that flexibility
Sure.
here in a minute. But how do you think remote workers are going to impact Columbus specifically? Like, our office is downtown, and I know that a lot of businesses around here have really been struggling just with the lack of office workers during the day. So what do you think we'll kind of see for the area in the long run?
If we want to talk about downtown specifically, that has been the most challenged area in the city, in the metro, and that's not unique to Columbus. We've seen it across a lot of cities, from Midtown Manhattan to many of our more mid-sized counterparts. It's definitely an issue for sure. It does raise questions about whether downtown, despite all the residential that was added, was it still too siloed in terms of the kinds of uses, kinds of people,
just to have residents.
Yeah, and not just the residents, but you have specific types of residents, right? You have the smaller apartments that are geared towards young professionals, and then you have some condo development that I guess cater to both young professionals and empty nesters. And I've been thinking about this a lot. You think about young professionals. How long are they going to live here before they start forming families, having kids, thinking about schools? Maybe it's 5 years, and then empty nesters. Maybe it's 10 years before they're regularly or permanently heading down somewhere warmer.
Yeah.
So if you think of it as like a market share of a person's life,
It's kind of transitional.
5 plus 10 years, 15 isn't that much. And one of the things I wonder is, should downtown really consider, whether it's the development corporation or the city or whoever, bringing a quality public elementary school just to increase the number of years that they can retain people. It also raises questions about what kind of residential development we need, right? Beyond the smaller apartment rentals and the condos. Do we need larger apartments? Do we need other types of homes that cater to more?
Because most of downtown, I think, is 1 and 2 bedrooms primarily, I would say.
On the rental side for sure. And even on the condo side, I guess that's true.
Not a lot of larger units anywhere in the area.
Yeah.
So obviously there are a lot of essential workers that have continued their jobs through the pandemic, but kind of outside of some of those sectors, what are some of the industries that you think just kind of can't stay remote, where we are going to see folks really coming back to that traditional workplace setting?
Well, on the industrial side, we've seen workers stay at their sites pretty much the whole time, right? So Columbus has been in the middle of a big e-commerce logistics boom, like various other locations around the U.S. And manufacturing here has been healthy as well. Maybe there were some struggles in the spring, but sectors like automotive bounced back. I think we can leave industrial aside for that kind of conversation, because that is tied to that location. If we're talking about office, that raises a whole ton of questions, right? And it depends on whether an employer is focused on cutting costs, what are their kind of core assets in terms of the office space and types of functions within an office that they need in a place versus the types of work that can be done elsewhere. And then there might be employers that are more about retaining talent, right? And if their employees are demanding a work from home hybrid option, then they got to figure out ways around that. So it really depends. One thing I think about in the context of our work, if you look at something like call centers, those have tended to be like 100 square feet, 150 square feet per employee, right? So pretty tight.
Very tight, very close.
Yeah, not conducive.
Not COVID friendly.
Right. And, that kind of space was always about saving money. And I think a lot of companies that are in that industry or have those functions have realized that the work can be done at home.
Yeah.
And the software is all there, even from a sort of a trust monitoring standpoint.
Yeah.
That there was plenty of that for call centers before COVID, right, at the office, and now that's transferred to home. And maybe with some things like that, there is a more permanent work from home type thing, and you still have maybe a space where people can come in for training, or if they just can't work at home. Maybe they can still come in, but those are the kind of things I see where, okay, remote might be the way to go, even from a cost standpoint for employers.
Time will tell, it seems.
Yes.
And a couple of things you just touched on as far as like employees and retaining talent. I think employee productivity and preference is going to play a big part in what comes next. Some people have done great working at home. Some people have kids and pets and family and don't have an office space, and it's just not ideal. So do you think that we are going to see more flexible workplace options? I think that's something you just kind of mentioned. And what might some of those models look like?
Yeah, again, that depends on sort of the leverage between the employers and the employees and the type of culture. But overall, I think hybrid's going to be the way a lot of employers go for a lot of functions. And definitely more flexibility. I mean, we were already starting to see some of this in the first place, right? Even pre-COVID, if you look at what traffic levels were on Fridays versus the other weekdays, or around holidays, they tended to be lower. And
I could see that with trying to park downtown sometimes.
Right.
I could tell when it was a holiday week or Friday.
And a lot of people were taking time off, or some people already had sort of a work from home option for Fridays, or and so we probably would see more of that kind of stuff happening sort of on the edges. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if for a lot of workers things seem, this is down the road a couple of years maybe, but it might seem still strikingly similar to the way we do things now, with a little bit more flexibility, maybe a bit more work from home.
I want to throw another kind of element into this, especially here in Columbus. I think right before the pandemic, we were really seeing this huge surge of coworking and, attracting some of these big name coworking spaces. What do you think's in store for the future of those kind of shared office spaces?
Yeah, coworking has been a fascinating thing to follow. I think at first, it took a hit back in the spring, but now, companies are seeing opportunities there. I mean, even locally we have someone like Cohatch, right?
Right, and they're just blowing up.
Yeah, investing like crazy, and that gets to the point I made earlier about, how employers are viewing their office as an asset, and what's core and what's not. So I think, there's the core part, focused around the culture, meeting, collaboration, and so forth, and certain other functions at an individual level that they'll want to retain.
Yeah.
But then depending on kind of the business fluctuations and what else is going on, are they trying to scale and test things out? I think there's going to be a lot more happening with the ability to flex, right?
Yeah.
And part of that's co-working or just more broadly short-term leases. And I think we're going to see more of that in expensive markets like New York. But even here, I think that will happen.
Yeah, because I'm sure there's, a lot of people maybe left their space now, and so landlords just need to get tenants in and do it however they
especially for people who just can't work at home, you still need some sort of option to get to. it's interesting how some of these surveys that have been done, surprisingly for myself and maybe some other people, it were the younger workers that really wanted to come back to the office.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not so much of an issue here, but for more expensive markets where they probably have roommates in tighter quarters, right?
Right.
To try to work from home in that setting, it's really difficult. So they want to come back.
Any other kind of broad predictions for the future of the workplace?
Well, to touch on downtown a bit, and because the greatest impact has been here, I've thought about this idea that existed beforehand in at least urban planning circles of a 10-minute neighborhood, right?
What does that mean?
Or 15-minute neighborhood. So you have a walkable area where you can access a lot of amenities and activities within a 10-minute walk, 15-minute walk. And, downtown has pieces of that. I think especially in the lockdown phase, we saw people who were taking full advantage of open space, parks, trails, right? And you had all the data from Google and others showing the level of traffic. So it does raise a lot of questions about how we invest in the public realm and diversify downtown and other neighborhoods, right, across the community beyond what they already have to make sure that it works in this kind of hybrid work model, right? Because someone's working, they can step out and do other things, and are all the things there to support that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some more insights about the future of the workplace.
Great. Thank you, Susan.